My name is Sarah. I was 28 years old. I lived with my husband Mark in a small flat in the city. Mark was a simple man. He worked at a small shop and came home tired every day. He did not have much money, but he always brought me something small. Sometimes it was my favorite fruit. Sometimes it was just a smile. He never missed dinner. He never raised his voice. But I felt something was missing. One weekend, my friend Emily invited me to a small party. She said it was just a few people from her office. I didn't want to go at first, but she said, "You need to get out. You need to feel new." Mark was not at home, so I said yes. I wore my best dress. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled. It had been a long time since I felt pretty. At the party, I met a man named Tony. He was tall, with dark hair and a soft voice. He wore a nice black suit and shiny shoes. He looked like a man from a movie. He smiled at me and said, "You have a beautiful smile." I laughed. I had not heard those words in years. We started to talk. He told me about his job, his house, his travels. He said he liked expensive watches and fast cars. He asked me about my life. I didn't say much. I just said, "I stay home a lot." He smiled and said, "You should not hide. You should shine." After the party, he sent me a message. I saw his name on my phone and felt something in my heart. "It was nice to meet you," he wrote. "You are different." I waited for a few hours, then wrote back, "Thank you. I had a good time too." That was the start of something I did not plan, but I wanted it to grow. Every day we talked. At first, just short messages, then longer ones, then phone calls. He told me I made him laugh. I told him I liked talking to him. When Mark came home, I stopped talking. I hid my phone, but I kept thinking about Tony. I waited for his messages. I smiled when I read his words. I felt young again. I felt wanted. Tony told me stories about his life. He went to big restaurants. He stayed in hotels near the sea. He flew in planes for work. He said, "Money is not a problem." He asked me, "Have you ever stayed in a hotel with a view?" I said no. He said, "Then one day I will show you." I started to dream of that day. My home felt small. The walls looked dull. Mark's clothes were old. The food we ate was plain. I looked at him and thought, he can never give me that life. I started to feel sad when he smiled. I started to feel cold when he touched my hand. I thought about Tony when I closed my eyes. One evening, I sent Tony a photo of the sunset. He replied, "It's beautiful, but not as beautiful as you." My heart jumped. I wrote back, "I wish I could see this with you." He said, "One day soon." He didn't talk about his wife. I didn't ask. I didn't want the truth. I wanted the dream. Tony made me feel special. He told me, "You are not like other women." I believed him. He sent me voice messages. His voice was calm and deep. He said, "You should not waste your life in that small home." I asked him, "What should I do?" He said, "Follow your heart." I started to meet him in quiet places. I told Mark I was meeting Emily. I told him I needed time alone. I told him I was tired, but I was with Tony. We walked near the river. We ate ice cream in his car. He opened the door for me. He held my hand when no one was looking. I felt like I was in a new world. Tony gave me a small gift one day. It was a necklace, soft and shiny. "For you," he said, "because you make me happy." I looked at it and said, "It's too much." He said, "Nothing is too much for you." I wore it under my shirt so Mark could not see, but I touched it every day. Mark started to notice I was different. He asked me, "Why do you smile at your phone?" I said, "Just talking to Emily." He asked, "Why are you always tired?" I said, "I don't sleep well." He said, "You don't hold my hand anymore." I said nothing. I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to stop. One night, Tony kissed me. I was afraid, then I kissed him back. I felt warm. I felt alive. I said, "I don't want to go home." He said, "Then stay." I didn't stay, but I wanted to. I started to count the days. I thought, one day I will not go back. I looked at Tony and thought, this is love. I looked at Mark and thought, this is duty. I didn't feel bad. I felt free. I told Tony, "I wish I met you first." He said, "Maybe this is the right time." I smiled. I believed him. That was the beginning of my fall, but at that time I didn't know. I only felt the wind in my hair and the fire in my heart. Days turned into weeks. My talks with Tony became longer. My time with Mark became shorter. I stopped cooking dinner. I stopped watching shows with him. I stayed in my room more. I told Mark, "I need space." He looked at me and said, "Okay." He didn't ask why. He just gave me the space I asked for. I used that space to talk to Tony. Tony and I started meeting more often, sometimes in quiet cafes, sometimes in parks. Sometimes he picked me up in his car and we just drove around. He played soft music. He looked at me when I spoke. He touched my hand. I forgot the world when I was with him. I forgot I had a home. I forgot I had a husband. All I wanted was that feeling of being loved, being seen. One afternoon, Tony said, "I wish I could take you to my house." I asked, "Why can't you?" He looked away and said, "My wife is still there. She doesn't leave." I was quiet. I wanted to ask more, but I didn't. I didn't want the answer. I wanted the dream. I told myself, he loves me. That is enough. I didn't think about what would happen later. I didn't think about his wife. I didn't think about the truth. I started to believe I was in love. I wrote small poems in my head. I looked at my face in the mirror and saw a new smile. I walked with more care. I spoke with a softer voice. I felt like a different person. I told Tony, "I wish we could be together always." He said, "We will." Just give me some time. I asked, "How much time?" He said, "Soon. I promise." That word, soon, became my hope. Every time I saw Mark, I felt cold. I started to leave home before he came back. I told him I was busy. I said I was helping Emily. I said I was learning new things. Mark never shouted. He just said, "Be safe." I think he knew something was wrong, but he didn't stop me. Maybe he didn't want to believe it. Tony started giving me more gifts. A bracelet, a red dress, perfume in a small glass bottle. I hid them in my bag. I never showed them to Mark. I told myself, one day I won't have to hide anything. I dreamed of living in a big house with clean walls and soft beds. I dreamed of walking next to Tony in front of everyone. I dreamed of being free. One day, Tony said, "Let's go away for a weekend." My heart jumped. I said, "Really?" He said, "Yes, just you and me." I said, "What about your wife?" He said, "She won't know. It's just one weekend." I didn't think. I just said yes. I felt like I was living a movie. I packed my bag with care. I told Mark, "I'm going to Emily's house for 2 days." He looked at me and nodded. I think he knew I was lying, but he didn't say anything. Tony took me to a place near the sea. It was quiet and far. The hotel room was big and bright. The window looked out to the blue water. I stood near the window and said, "This is like a dream." He came behind me and said, "It's your dream. You deserve it." We spent 2 days there. We ate good food. We talked for hours. We didn't think about the world. I didn't think about Mark. I didn't think about the lie I told. I felt happy. I felt full. I felt like this was the life I should have had from the start. But something small started to grow in my heart. A small voice. It said, "He still goes home to his wife." I tried to push it away, but it stayed. When he left me at the flat after the weekend, I waited for him to say something. Something like, "Let's live together soon." But he just kissed my hand and said, "Take care." I walked into my flat. Mark was sitting at the table. He looked tired. He looked older. He asked, "Did you have a nice time at Emily's?" I said yes and walked into the bedroom. I closed the door and sat on the bed. My heart was still warm from the weekend, but my hands felt cold. I looked around the room. It was dark and quiet. The walls were thin. The air was heavy. I thought about Tony's world, so big, so light, and I wanted to go back there. But I didn't hear from Tony for 2 days. I sent him a message. "I miss you." No reply. I waited. I sent another one. "Are you okay?" Still nothing. My hands started to shake. My mind started to race. I thought, maybe his wife found out. Or maybe I was just a game. Late that night, he finally replied, "Sorry, I was busy." Just that. No heart, no voice, No, I miss you too. My stomach hurt. I didn't sleep. I turned on my side and looked at Mark. He was sleeping. His hand was near mine. I moved away. I didn't want to feel guilt, but it was there. Quiet. Cold. Strong. The next day, Tony called me. I answered fast. He said, "Things are hard right now." I asked, "Are we still okay?" He said, "Yes, but don't message me too much. My wife checks my phone." I didn't speak. I just said, "Okay." But inside, I felt something break. I sat on the couch that evening and stared at the wall. Mark brought me tea and said, "You look tired." I said, "I'm fine." But I was not fine. I felt like I was standing between two roads. One road was safe but slow. The other road was bright but dangerous. And I had already walked too far down the second one. The days after that call felt long. I waited for Tony to write, but he didn't. When he did, the messages were short. Busy. Talk later. Can't meet now. I felt like a stranger. He was the man who once called me beautiful every day. Now he didn't even ask if I was okay. I told myself, he still loves me, but I was not sure anymore. I tried to stay calm. I told myself, he needs time. But I knew something had changed. The way he spoke, the way he looked at me the last time. It was not the same. I sat in silence most days. I held my phone and waited. Sometimes I didn't eat. Sometimes I didn't move from the chair for hours. Mark noticed. He asked, "Is something wrong?" I said, "No, just tired." He brought me food. He asked if I wanted to go for a walk. I said no. He smiled and said, "You used to love walking." I said nothing. His words felt far away. One afternoon, I opened my phone to send Tony a long message. I wanted to ask, "Do you still care?" But before I could write, I saw something. A photo. It was posted by someone else. It was Tony with a woman, his wife. They were smiling. She was holding his arm. They looked happy. I stared at the photo for a long time. My heart felt cold. I dropped the phone on the floor. That night, Mark made dinner. I didn't eat. He asked, "Why do you look so sad?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I just said, "I'm not hungry." He looked at me and said, "You're not the same anymore. You're always far away." I said, "Please stop." He stood up and walked out of the room. Later that night, I looked through my phone. I read the old messages from Tony, all the sweet words, all the promises. I smiled a little. Then I cried. I asked myself, was any of it real? I didn't know. I wanted to believe it was, but deep down, I knew it was just a dream I wanted too much. The next morning, I saw Tony's message. "We should stop talking for a while." Just that. No reason. No goodbye. My hands went cold. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I sat on the bed and stared at the floor. I had left my heart with him. Now he didn't want it anymore. That evening, Mark came home early. He looked tired. He looked like he had something to say. He placed his phone on the table. Then he looked at me. I tried to smile. He didn't smile back. He said, "I read your messages." My body froze. He said, "I know about Tony." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mouth was dry. My hands started to shake. He sat down. He didn't shout. He didn't cry. He just asked, "Why?" I looked at him. I saw pain in his eyes. I saw a man who didn't understand what he did wrong. I said, "I don't know." But I did know. I just couldn't say it. Mark asked, "Do you love him?" I said, "Yes." I didn't lie. I couldn't lie anymore. He looked down. He held his head in his hands. He said, "So what now?" I said, "I want a divorce." He looked up. His eyes were red. He said, "After all I gave you, you want to leave?" I said, "I'm sorry." He stood up and walked around the room. Then he said something I never expected. He said, "Tell me your price. How much money do you want to leave?" I looked at him, shocked. "What?" I asked. He said, "You want a new life, right? A better life. With him. So how much will it cost me?" His voice was calm, but his face was full of hurt. I said, "It's not about money." He laughed, but it was a sad laugh. "It's always about money," he said. I didn't reply. I packed a small bag and left that night. I told myself, I'll go to Tony. He'll take me in. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything. I just walked out. Mark didn't stop me. He just stood at the door and watched me go. I went straight to Tony's place. I stood near the gate. I called him. No answer. I sent a message. "I left everything. I'm here." Nothing. I waited outside his house for an hour, then 2. The lights in the house stayed off. No one came out. I sat on the ground, cold and alone. Finally, I called again. He picked up. His voice was quiet. He said, "You can't be here." I said, "I have no place to go." He said, "You need to leave. My wife is home." I said, "You said you loved me." He said, "Things have changed." I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I stood up and walked away. I had nowhere to go. I had no one to call. I sat at a bench in the park and watched the sky turn dark. In that moment, I knew. I had lost everything. My home, my husband, my dreams. And the man I left everything for didn't want me either. That night in the park was cold. I had no jacket. I had no bag. I had just my phone and a small purse. I looked at the dark sky and closed my eyes. I wanted to go back in time. I wanted to stop myself from going to that party. I wanted to hold Mark's hand again, but it was too late. I tried to call a friend. No one picked up. I sat on the bench for hours. My legs started to hurt. My phone battery was low. I had no plan. I had no place to sleep. I thought about going to a hotel, but I had little money, and I didn't want to be alone in a room again. Not that night. In the morning, I walked to a small cafe. I used my last money to buy tea. I sat near the window and watched people walk by. Everyone looked busy. Everyone had somewhere to go. I had nothing. I had no home. I had no love. I had only myself, and that didn't feel like much. I thought about Tony. I opened our old messages. I read them one by one. So many sweet words. So many promises. But now, none of them mattered. He had a wife. He had a home. I was just a part of his fun. When the fun was over, he walked away. I thought about Mark, his quiet voice, his tired eyes, the way he looked at me the night I left. I had hurt him. I had broken him. He didn't fight me. He didn't shout. He just let me go. That was real love, but I didn't see it then. I wanted to go back. I wanted to say sorry. I wanted to sit with him and drink tea. I wanted to watch a movie with him on our old couch. I wanted to laugh at something small. I wanted the life I had thrown away, but I didn't know if he would even open the door. I waited 2 days. Then I went back to our old flat. I stood outside and looked at the window. It was dark. I knocked on the door. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. A neighbor came out and said, "He left yesterday. He moved out." I asked, "Where did he go?" The neighbor said, "He didn't say." I sat on the steps and cried. I had no one left. I had no family in the city. I had no job. I had no home. I thought Tony was my way out. But now I saw he was just a wall I hit hard. And now I was broken. Weeks passed. I found a small room in a shared house. It was cold and old. I found a part-time job at a cleaning service. I didn't talk to anyone much. I worked. I slept. I thought. That was all. Every night I closed my eyes and saw Mark. I saw his kind face. I remembered the way he looked at me the first time we met. I remembered the simple dinners, the soft music, the nights when we sat close and said nothing, but felt full. That was real love. But I had walked away. One evening I saw Mark in the market. He was with someone, a woman. They were smiling. He looked happy. My heart stopped. I stood behind a tree and watched. He looked different, lighter, brighter. I wanted to run to him, but I didn't. I stayed there until they left. I walked home slowly. My chest hurt. Not because he moved on, but because I saw what I had lost. He had forgiven me in his heart, I think. But he had not waited. He had started again. Without me. That night, I sat on my bed and wrote a short message to him. Just one line. "I'm sorry." I didn't send it. I just looked at it, Then I deleted it. It would not change anything now. It was too late. I looked around my small room. It was quiet. It was clean. But it was not home. My real home was gone. And I had thrown it away with my own hands. If I could speak to my younger self, I would say, do not chase gold. Do not trade love for dreams that are not real. You may lose everything. Now I wake up each day and go to work. I do not wait for messages. I do not hope for love. I live with my mistake, and I learn from it.